Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and thank you for joining us for this very important discussion on the future of food. We are so excited to have you today, and we have such an amazing group of panelists. I'm just starstruck by the plethora of wealth and experiences on this panel, so you're in for a treat. We're going to be talking about the future of food and Africa's contributions to the world. And really, our objective today is to showcase Africa's role in driving the future of food globally, to showcase Africa's dynamic and innovative entrepreneurs who are serving as narrative changers in the global food ecosystem, and to discuss critical steps to amplify Africa's voice and impact in the global food and nutrition ecosystem. And we have four dynamic panelists. We have Chef Pierre Thiam, who needs no introduction if you're in food. Not only is he a chef with restaurants in Africa and the United States, but he's also the founder of Yolela Foods and is a narrative changer pushing fonio as a better alternative to quinoa and so many other nutritious and superfoods. Chef Pierre is a living legend, and we're honored to have him on our panel today. Next, we have Ozoz Sokoh, who has plethora of hats she wears. She's a stylist, a cook, a writer, a photographer, a historian, a food historian. She is just an amazing change agent and leader, reshaping narratives around African food and building bridges between Africa and the rest of the world. And we're honored to have Ozoz with us today. And then we have Lesego, who is a dynamic young entrepreneur leading the charge from her home birthplace of South Africa. She wears many, many hats with Bokamoso Investments, where she produces a range of wonderful food products. She also inspires young people to go into agriculture through her many, many philanthropic ventures. And she's a leader in the youth landscape in South Africa, driving change across different sectors and investing in young people through her multiple businesses. And last but not least, Fadel Ndiame, who is the Vice President of AGRA, the Alliance for Green Revolution for Africa. And Fadel is championing tremendous transformation across Africa, not only in seed systems and markets and financing and equity, gender equity, but really the revolution that we all want in the food and agricultural landscape in Africa, and has a wealth of experience in many, many sectors, both as a philanthropist, but also as a practitioner in the agriculture and food landscape. So you can agree with me that this is a star-studded panel and we're in for a treat. My name is Ndidi Okonkwo Nwuneli. I'm a social entrepreneur with a home base in Lagos, Nigeria. And I work in many, many facets as the managing partner and co-founder of Sahel Consulting, the co-founder of Ace Foods, the founder of Nourishing Africa, and most recently, the founder of Changing Narratives Africa. So I'm going to jump into the panel discussion because we want to really hear from a dynamic panel. And I'll start with Ozoz. Ozoz, you have been working for the last 15 years on many, many issues around food and the way food is perceived and Africa's role. Can you just tell us, what role do you think Africa currently plays in the global food ecosystem?
Thanks, Ndidi, first of all, and it's my pleasure to be on this great panel. The role that Africa plays globally is similar to the role that Africa has played historically, and that is one of both knowledge production, but also contributions from intellectual and physical aspects. And so if we look at historical crops and grains, rice, beans, palm oil, Africa, West Africa had a huge role in making those go global, both in terms of providing the seed, but also the techniques, systems to plant them and have them take root economically. It's the same thing today. Lots of the crops in Africa, sesame seeds, palm oil, groundnut oil, lots of things are still traversing the globe from Africa. And with that goes a lot more inquiry and research into how these things can really be expanded, how they can be processed, and how the world can make the best use of them. So Africa still has a great role in agriculture and in the knowledge that upholds that.
Thank you, Ozoz. You know, through your work, I've seen how you almost are rebranding African food, but also making sure the world knows about Africa's contributions historically and Africa's role today. So you've talked about not only the value chains we've contributed, our techniques, our cooking methods. When you think about the future of food and Africa's role in it, what excites you the most? And what role are not only enthusiasts such as you, but food historians and narrative changers playing in that landscape?
I'm most excited about a renaissance, a reawakening. I see Africans being a lot more interested in exploring, understanding, feasting on Africa's gifts, foods, and drinks, and that brings me immense joy. I also see a lot of parallel development in things like documenting. So I see filmmakers, musicians, people working with textiles and fabric, graphic designers, poets, storytellers coming together to have food at the core of a lot of the things that they do, and just finding ways to work together. A few months ago, I worked on a series of short films showcasing and celebrating the history of rice, beans, palm oil, okra, and sugarcane. And I couldn't have told the story as powerfully as I did without the help of a Nigerian-British poet, spoken word poet, who voiced the films. Her name is Tolu Agbelusi, and she did an excellent job. And so we're going to find these intersections of sectors, gifts, techniques coming together to tell the stories about our food, and hopefully define pathways where beyond the table, beyond eating, there's a lot of interest around the history, the heritage, and, you know, all of that.
Thank you so much. Just put in a plug for your Feast Afrique. Just an amazing website. You have to mention that. You have
okay,
to.
So thank you. So a few months ago, I realized that one of the gaps for Africans getting to know and understand African food was literature. And so I spent a few months compiling about 250 books from the 1800s to date, looking at bibliographies that basically focused on West African culinary heritage and diasporic culinary heritage. I gathered those books on my site called Feast Afrique. So there's a digital library, but there are also a host of other resources, including a Hall of Fame. And the goal with this is really to enable scholarship. So whether that is on a personal, individual level, or in the more academic settings, that people have these resources, these references to further understand the history, contribution, but also the future of West African culinary heritage, African culinary heritage, and its diaspora. Thanks for that, Ndidi.
Thank you so much, Ozoz. You know, when I listen to you, it makes me think of the Marcus Garvey quote, that if we understand our roots, if we embrace our roots, then we have wings to fly. And so learning about our culinary history and our contributions to the global food ecosystem gives us the courage and the pride to fly into the future. So thank you for all the good work you do. Now I want to just let the audience know you can send questions. Please put your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll definitely address them as we proceed. So I'm moving swiftly to Fadel. And Fadel, you have been such an integral part of the future, shaping the future of food through Africa's role in the UN Food System Summit. Obviously, Dr. Agnes Kalibata was at the helm of this, but I know through the work of AGRA that you were so critical in a critical voice in shaping that agenda. Now, following the UN Food System Summit, which was only a few weeks ago, what gives you hope about the future of food? And what gives you the greatest concern when you think about Africa's role in the future of food?
Thank you very much, Ndidi. It's such a pleasure to be part of this panel. I'm amazed and excited by what Ozoz was saying earlier. I think it resonates so well with all of us, the need to be properly rooted and know our own value and take our narrative to the world. I think in a sense, the UN Food System Summit brought out some dimension of that. Firstly, it was a discussion on food. And I'm sure my brother Pierre will tell us, food is culture, it tastes, it smells, it's life. There is no life without good food. Now, the fact that the world is discussing about food is significant in many aspects. Because the truth is we are not succeeding in most of the targets that were set up as part of the SDG. We're not winning on poverty, we're not winning on hunger, we're not winning on malnutrition, and you have significant challenges on the continent. And I think we have to start to say, even though we are the most youthful, one of the most, the population growth in the continent is significant, a majority of Africans are hungry. In fact, 1 out of 5 Africans are hungry. And the numbers don't look good. Now, in this context, a discussion on food system compels us to think differently. Because food is really about, especially if you talk about healthy food, it's really at the cross section between food, environment, livelihood, and youth and employment. So what this discussion, what I'm really excited about this is the framing of a discussion around healthy diet for all, healthy diet for all. Now, I'm a Senegalese. I mean, as you know, healthy diet for me associated with rice, with fish, with chebujan. If I ask my neighbor from Kenya, they'll talk about other things, in particular, some of the dishes that I'm still learning to appreciate. But the point here is taking a diverse perspective, listening to different constituents in different geography, really enable us to bring a new conversation around the plurality of food. What we don't want is to have a convergence around one food system that will really dominate the rest of the world, while each country, each culture, each locality has an opportunity to contribute. So the part of the food system that was amazing from me is the fact that not only you have dialogue with government, but you also have a set of stakeholders, non-stake actors, independent dialogue from all quarters, from the village to the continent, discussing about what is working, what is not working, but more importantly, coming up with what we call game-changing proposition. So I'm excited about the prospect of really tapping into what Ozoz was talking about, exploring into our know-how, our knowledge, our, in terms of food, in terms of life, in terms of how we cook it, but also making sure that we take to the world what Africa has to offer, because we are probably the continent that has most natural resources, but also most diversity. And I think the opportunity we have is to find new way of working around how we produce food, how we consume it, how we process it, how we distribute it, that enable us to maintain and enhance that diversity in the context of climate change. So I think the future of the world is in Africa from that point of view, if I can say.
Thank you, Fadel. I completely agree with you. And what we're trying to do today is just totally to ensure that the rest of the world doesn't have a single story about Africa. For too long, the face of Africa has been a hungry child, and we have to change that face. And as you were talking about nutrition, I was reminded about a recent documentary I watched on the history of food, and it starts in Africa, right? And it actually shows that the plant-based diets, the nutrient-rich diets, the superfoods were all how we were eating in the early days. And that we've actually moved away from the great richness of our culture and our heritage, which is what Ozoz is trying to reclaim, and many of us are working to amplify. Now, as you think about institutions like AGRA and institutions like the UN, FAO, IFAD, who actually often own that narrative, what can we do to start infiltrating those institutions with this other story that Africa is a contributor, Africa is shaping the future of food, not just the recipients of aid and food aid and support? How can we start working internally to get those organizations to see that diversity of opinion and of agendas?
I think that's an important question. I think firstly, we have to embrace, again, it resonates with what Sokoh was saying. Let's embrace who you are and the diversity of voices. I think, Ndidi, that spoke to the work you're also doing. Many people thought the continent was sinking, but not realizing that you have a whole ecosystem of small and medium enterprises that are doing everything from managing the supply chain, collecting the food, processing it, distributing it, to the point that 70% of everything we eat in our cities go through this ecosystem of active, agile, and entrepreneurial agents. I think it's just speak to the dynamism that we have in our society. I think to recapture the narrative, we need to give back voices to the whole person across all geography. Let's stop making food discussion a matter of nutritionists or scientists or breeders. Let's listen to everybody, listen to all culture, and make sure that at the village, at the national, at the country and continental level, we have a conversation around the plurality of food. For me, this is around the governance of food, making sure that all of us, our mouth is in it. This is what we say in my language. When they want to say, even democracy means my mouth is in it. And you can't taste somebody else's food. I mean, your own, you have, what is true, you are the only one who can taste the savor, the flavor of your food. So in short, I think just unleashing this potential, the opportunity of youth and women, building on the digital technology that enable now to really connect beyond you don't need to come to my place. We can connect and share information. I think the continent can leapfrog, building on the energy of the youth and on our culture. Ultimately, the future is about culture. Sheikh Anta Diop used to say, if you don't know your roots, you cannot progress. You have to know yourself. Knowing yourself, the language you speak, the food you eat, the music you play. Just to finish, I mean, I went in a village in Malawi, back then. They knew two people. One was El Haji Diouf, a soccer player, and the other one is Yusundur. For me, that's the hope. That means our creative mind, the youth, the energy of our artists is eventually that will shape the narrative of this continent. And to depart from a position of need to a wealth that we can share and allow the rest of the world to benefit. Like they come here to see the wildlife, to get the sun, etc. I think we have so much more to offer to the world, but we need to build our own asset base, our own culture, our own narrative, and this is exactly what Sokoh was referring to earlier. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we're changing mindsets within traditional institutions, and we're changing mindsets on the streets. Definitely, Africa has so much to offer the world, and our food is one of the greatest attractions. And I know that Chef Pierre agrees with me. So I'm moving swiftly. Chef Pierre, when I think about you, and when I tell the story of Changing Narratives Africa, I use Chef Pierre as my role model. And when I say a narrative changer, Chef Pierre, they say, we get it. We get what you're doing. You have been shaping the narrative as a chef, as an entrepreneur. What do you see as the future of food and Africa's role in it? And what role are chefs and individuals like you playing to accelerate not only the image of Africa, but also the whole movement around superfoods and nutrition? Chef Pierre.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you for your generous introduction. This is really, really great to be part of this panel, listening to Oz. Hello, Oz, good friend, and Dr. Ndiame. They said it all, really. Africa, the future of food without Africa is impossible, really, for different reasons. One is the current food system is not sustainable, that we can all agree to it. The system that really imposed upon us a limited global diet. We're all eating pretty much the same things, a very limited number, less than 10 ingredients, and ignoring thousands of crops, especially from Africa, thousands of crops that are nutritious, delicious, this is important as a chef, and great for the planet, and this is what we need to focus on. There's no way we're going to feed 10 billion people in less than 30 years. If we keep this current food system, we need to revisit it. And like Oz said, go back in history and learn from what we have, our heritage, really, what we have left. There are so many resilient crops Those are the keys to future food security and nutrition security. They lie in unlocking the potential of those underutilized crops. And that's why, as a chef, it came organically for me. But when I started Yolele, my company, it was with this idea to open a global market for those underutilized crops of Africa. You mentioned fonio. Fonio is just a Trojan horse, really. It was a perfect uh, crop that checked all the boxes. The crop grain that grows in poor soil, that's drought resistant, that's very, very nutritious. And to make it even more exciting, it cooks in 5 minutes. It cooks in 5 minutes. It's very versatile. There's so many ways to adapt it in so many different recipes. So I took a challenge of introducing fonio to a global market. I was like, this grain can become a global crop, a world-class crop. And we started in New York. New York is so-called food capital of the world. And that worked. In less than 4 years, we went from one supermarket to all the Whole Foods of America, close to 3,000 supermarkets now, and growing, not to mention the strong e-commerce platform with the usual suspect, Thrive, Direct, Fresh Market, Amazon, of course, yolele.com. So there's a demand for that. There's a growing demand. People are conscious of the need to not only revisit our nutrition, but to also expand our global diet. By doing that, we're not only saving biodiversity, because those crops, if we don't consume them, if there's no markets for those crops, they tend to disappear. I'm sure Dr. Ndiame will confirm that the thousands of crops have disappeared. I mean, all of us, we can witness going back home and looking for things that we had eaten when we were young, and they're no longer around because we haven't figured out a way to create the chain of value. And this is the key. And Africa is going to be the answer to that, not only because, like Dr. Ndiame said, we have thousands of such crops here, or Ndidi, you said that too. But in addition to that, Africa has 60% of the world's arable land, which is so important to realize that where we're going to be finding our food in the near future is where we can grow our food. 60% of that is in Africa, because the global food system has ruined our soils. There's less than 5% in America left. People don't talk about it. The soil of this country has been ruined by this system, that monoculture that imposed on the soil to grow a specific crop year round, regardless of the season, using chemicals, destroying the water supplies, destroying the soil. 30% of the world's greenhouse gas emission is caused by this food system. So we talk about climate change, this is the food system. So we need to really change it, and it cannot be done without taking Africa into consideration. And like Dr. Ndiame said, it also has to take every actors from the small farming communities, which is where it's going to come from, the small farming communities. This is not the big farm. You're not talking about big agri. This revolution is going to start from the small farming communities who already know how to do it, who have been doing it for thousands of years. We have to stop being arrogant and coming and say we're going to teach them how to do it. They will teach us how to do it. We have to also invest, equip them, invest in creating that chain of supply, the supply chain that will take it from their farms to a supermarket in Kansas City or in Dakar or in Lagos. I mean, that's what we need to do. We have to facilitate it, but we're not teaching them anything. We are grateful that they were able to save these crops for us. They were able to transmit it from generation to generation. And today we are here. We are facing a wall. This is actually a critical situation. Like Dr. Ndiame said, we are failing on all those challenges. Sustainable development goals we are not succeeding. And we need to have like a serious change of approach. A serious revolution needs to happen. And this is going to happen with the help of the small farming communities of Africa. This is how it's going to happen. And we have to make sure we do it with integrity, because that's those 60% left of arable land is also right now targets to land grabbers from like the same usual suspect, big agri. They depleted the land in the other side of the world. Now Africa is the only place left. And if we are not careful, they're coming and grabbing it. They are doing it right now with the help of corrupt governments. We see that happening, and this is something that we need to address. We need to address it seriously, because this is a matter of death of life for the planet, for all of us. We are all concerned. We are 10 billion people coming up in 30 years. So this is really a serious situation, and all of us play a role in it. We need to revisit history, to learn from that, and bring it back here in a way that's comprehensive for everyone. That it's not the communication, the language should be it shouldn't be happening in the salons only at the United Nations, where no one is understanding. It's just about people's ego, really. It should be starting at the bottom, from the small farming communities in little villages around Africa. I can hear you.
Thank you so much, Chef Pierre. You see why I call him a narrative changer. Have you heard a chef speak like a climate champion, a farmer advocate? Honestly, Chef Pierre, we need to clone you, because your passion and your dedication to this ecosystem is commendable. Thank you so much for being such a great champion. Thank you.
Well, thank you for all your panelists, really. I mean, I was really impressed by
yes,
everyone. Yeah, really, everyone is playing an amazing role. And yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
Thank you. So last but not least, I have to call on my sister Lesego, who is an entrepreneur at the forefront of innovation in South Africa. Lesego, as entrepreneurs, SMEs, I think Fadel spoke so eloquently about the role SMEs play. Without the SMEs in the food ecosystem, we don't have a food ecosystem, right? The farmers are integral, but the SMEs process and ensure year-round production of food. The innovation comes from you as well. What role are entrepreneurs playing in shaping the future of food in Africa? And speaking from your experience, what gives you hope and what gives you concern? Lesego.
Thank you so much, Ndidi, and thank you to my fellow panelists. I mean, as Dr. Fadel mentioned, food is culture. So in my world as an entrepreneur, food is currency. And entrepreneurs, we thrive where we see opportunities, right? So we start our businesses where we see gaps. And the fact that Africa is a net importer of food, it's very discouraging, but also it's a great opportunity for us as food entrepreneurs to build on that. One, it's not only building, but also making sure that we create jobs in the entire value chain, from manufacturing to value add to logistics, blockchain, everything. So we actually see that as an opportunity. I think the fact that we need to actually change the narrative or even the mindset of young people as to how they see agriculture. It takes a lot of effort, and I think it's going to still take all the players to be involved, because the fact that when I was doing my master's at the LSE, and part of my research was around food and education, and the fact that we import so much food, yet we have so much arable land, did not make sense. And so I spent a lot of time like in countries like Israel, where they've actually used agriculture to literally like build the economy, to like export. Israelis export so much. And I think I was shocked when I got there and I realized that Israel is like the size of Kruger National Park, and half of it is like desert. And I was shocked, because I'm like, how do people grow food in the desert? And it's all technology. It's literally using resources wisely, whether it's water, whether it's chemicals, finding better ways to like irrigate efficiently. And it got me super excited after meeting with few companies and farmers in Israel to actually come back and invest in an agri-hub in the desert of the Kalahari, one focusing on the education part of agriculture, because yes, people are still farming in rural areas. And I will tell you that young people don't want to be in rural areas because they don't see agriculture as attractive. I would rather be, some people would rather be in Cape Town, they'd rather be in Johannesburg. But then now there's this realization that actually it's not just farming cabbages, it's actually like value add. You can actually like process that cabbage, pack it nicely, make sure that your label is correct, you are compliant, and you can actually get $2 or $3 more. But it takes a lot of education and a lot of leading by example as well to attract young people. So I do feel like right now, entrepreneurs are getting involved in value add. I mean, if you look at the cocoa industry as well, people are thinking about not just taking the cocoa to Europe and other countries to be processed, but how do we make sure that we actually process here at home and we actually export the final product to the world? And I see that as a currency because that's how we're able to create more jobs across all industries in Africa. So I particularly have, I have a foods business. I built my factory in a rural area because I believe when you actually build a food processing facility in a rural area that people can see, it changes how they think about their communities. And for me, the fact that, my workers, our employees, they walk to work, it's so powerful, especially given our history in South Africa, where a lot of employees spend half of their salary commuting from Johannesburg, the other side of Johannesburg. It's like the perfect setup, to have beehives, and there aren't many bee farmers in South Africa. So what did we do? We made sure that we established a bee farm where we take part in the entire value chain. We manufacture beehives, we process the honey, and we work with farmers to acquire beehives. And not only are we supplying honey locally, but we're looking at exporting our honey to the global markets and telling the African story, that you can actually have a competitive product that has a true African story. And so there are so many opportunities in the food industry, and I see food as the future, as the new oil or the new gold. Because we do have the land, but we need capacity building, and we need a lot of support from infrastructure side to compliance, to helping our entrepreneurs understand the basics, and we will fly.
Thank you so much, Lesego. I love that. Food is currency, not just culture, it's currency. We can create wealth from food. We can create jobs from food. And thank you so much for all that you do in the rural communities. One last question for you before I go to the Q&A questions that are coming in. When you think about all the platforms you're part of, Nourishing Africa, Changing Narratives Africa, what will it take for entrepreneurs such as yourself to scale across Africa and to the world? And what are some very tangible steps that some change agents in our midst, Fadel is one change agent, he has influence, but others in the political landscape can play to really support this urgent scaling that we need?
Nourishing Africa and and similar organizations have changed, particularly Nourishing Africa plays such an important role in filling the existing gap in the African food and agriculture industry. I mentioned capacity building. For example, our entrepreneurs need to be formal. They need to be formalized. A lot of them have been running their businesses informally. A lot of them don't have banks. They go to their neighbors. And when a lot of them apply for funding from whether it's AFGRA or AGRA or wherever, a lot of them may not, they don't end up accessing that financing because they are not formal. And the way that the West looks at processing of bankability of an entrepreneur is totally different from someone who's in a deep rural area. So I think Nourishing Africa has been playing such a big role in gathering and creating a platform for all entrepreneurs to understand what it takes for them to be compliant, what it takes for them to be formal, to be registered as well. And I also know that we also do monthly conversations with people from various industries, and I think it's been good because our entrepreneurs are also starting to think beyond Africa, that we can actually access the global market, but then there's so much that needs to be done in order for us as entrepreneurs to access the global market. For example, some things are hard for us. For you to be compliant, for you to acquire various food certification, from the ISO certificates to all of them, it's very, very expensive. However, I do feel like this calls for an opportunity for different foundations, different players to think about how to help our entrepreneurs be export ready from the logistics perspective, because we do have the product. It's just that there's this disconnect when it comes to information. Once our entrepreneurs can know that this is the demand in Asia, this is the demand in America, this is what is required for them to be compliant, whether it's fair trade, I think we will just blossom. But it's going to take all of us to come together to make sure that all our entrepreneurs are export ready.
Thank you so much, Lesego. You give us so much hope. And I know that you've been working with Nourishing Africa and Changing Narratives Africa to get those products on global shelves. So thank you for all that you do and for being such a positive role model, not just for youth in South Africa, but for youth across Africa. We have a few questions coming in. The first one from Lisa. What role do you think local organizations, NGOs can and should play in supporting local farmers? So I'm going to ask Fadel to just talk a bit briefly to respond to that, given that AGRA works very closely with local farmers, and then Lesego also to jump in, because I know both of you work closely with local farmers.
No, thanks.
Fadel.
I think it's a great question, and I think it ties back everything we've been talking about. I think what it basically, if I give a very rough picture, Pierre is at the front line, because ultimately, value and currency is created at the consumer level. So you have an ecosystem that will shape the dynamic food in a way that favor flavor, authenticity, traceability. These are the opportunities. And as you say, Lesego, we are spending a lot of money buying food. Even when you move to town, you buy food. This is why accessing the retailing industry is so important. So to ask very quickly is to see there is a value chain here. When as a consumer, I spend 100, we need to understand how much goes back to the farmer. Very little. And one of the reasons is because the farmer cannot meet the quantity, quality, and timeliness requirement of what the consumer is looking for. And this is where all the help should be to link Pierre to you, Lesego, and to the NGOs who help farmers. And this is what AGRA does. It's an ecosystem play. But we have to be pulled by the market, by understanding what is the consumer looking for, because this is where you realize the currency and the value. And I think this is really that ecosystem play, which very mimic what you're doing with Nourishing Africa, which is a network, a platform where you share idea, knowledge, information. I think this is the really pathway to creating wealth, to unlock it, and people will fund you because you are successful, not because you need it. Money doesn't go to need, it goes to success. And the success story is to build on what Pierre is doing, educating the world that you can have good food, nutrition food, by using short circuits value chain that are grown by local people, but who can meet the standard. We cannot compromise on standard, quality, quantity, and timeliness. And this is where all our help can help us build a much more robust and resilient food system. So we all have to have hands on deck, but you guys are already showing the way. I think don't be too shy and modest. I think this is what it takes. It's that ecosystem that lie on everybody from the consumer back to the producer.
Thank you, Dr. Fadel. Lesego, do you want to chime in on what NGOs
yes,
can
I'd
also
love
do?
to add to what Dr. Fadel mentioned, that, we need to be competitive, and that's part of changing the narrative of Africa, that we're not just recipients, right? So even if we take food to the world, our quality has to be superior, and business is competitive, right? So if you're doing beans, you can't just bring beans and expect those beans, to get certain value because you've done beans. Your beans has to be much better than the other beans in South America. That's the type of mindset that we should be thinking about. Number two, I always talk to entrepreneurs about looking at the demand. So the biggest challenge sometimes with African agri-entrepreneurs is that people venture into, we're going to plant tomatoes. Everyone is doing tomatoes or lychees or whatever. Start to think about what's in demand. Do your research. If there's paprika that's in demand, or garlic elsewhere in Asia or in America, focus on the end, or something that's new, like what Chef Pierre was saying, something that's nutritious, it's not yet in the market, and start filtrating the market, because you need to find that niche entrance, into the market. But I would say that you need to be very, very competitive. You need to be very patient, but also invest in relationships. Relationships are also currency, guys. Make sure that you take time. Not everyone will do everything for you, but make sure that you do the research as well, and ask for help. Don't be shy. Just throw yourself out there.
Thank you so much. This issue of partnerships and collaboration is so key as we shape the future of food. And I think Ozoz started us off on that dimension. We need all actors. We need those in the media. We need those influencers, we need the farmers, we need the processors, we need the logistics providers, we need the financiers, we need the quality control standards, all of them together, working together collaboratively. And to this issue of the NGOs, we need the NGOs. We need the NGOs doing the training and support, but we need to support local organizations and empower local organizations to do the work. You know, time has gone where Africa needs parachuting help from other parts of the world who think they know better than what Africans can do, because we're embracing our indigenous knowledge and celebrating that. So thank you all for those insights. I'm coming back to you, Ozoz. You know, you've done a phenomenal job of leveraging media to tell stories. You mentioned the documentaries. I can't wait to see them. You're working on, you know, even how you use photography to tell stories. And I'm just wondering, how can we amplify that? Because I spent the summer in the US. The average American does not know one dish from the African continent. I'm now in Canada, it's the same thing, you know, and so it's an uphill battle. What can we do to amplify that and get that into the mainstream? And what, you know, what are some practical steps that all of us narrative changers who want to work together can do to support people like you to amplify your voice?
Thank you very much. It's a multi-pronged approach. At the heart of it, I think that we have to create awareness, and we have to inspire a love of who we are, what our food is, from Africans. There's a mindset reframing that needs to happen. We need to, for too long, we've been told our food is smelly, our food doesn't look pretty, and even when you can, and our ingredients are a bit, you know, basic, but I can tell you that, you know, when you put French tête de veau, which is cow head stew, next to Nigerian nkwobi, or isiewu, which is a goat head stew, there's no comparison about which one is more delicious, right? So there's that sense of first building up, helping people appreciate, removing the shame, because then we become our own greatest ambassadors. That's one. The other part is I see a very specific Western focus on showcasing African food media in a particular light. And that light usually is, it's difficult, it's foreign, it's difficult for people to understand the context. And I'm like, no, what we need to do is, first of all, create access and allow us tell our stories the way we want to tell them, with the agency that we have, rather than having non-Africans tell African stories. But there's also the understanding that we can use comparison and analogies to help people contextualize the kinds of foods that we eat. So it's a multi-pronged approach. And then final thing is on us ourselves creating platforms, creating our own platforms where we share a variety of knowledge across the value chain. So everything from the larger agriculture, climate change, to the more individual, everyone should grow something in their back garden. We grew okra, greens, we had fruit trees. It didn't really take a lot. But I see such a disconnect today, even for the simple ways that we can reconnect to agriculture that we really don't take advantage of. So how can we encourage people in our communities, in our little spheres of influence, about growing one little thing in their back garden? How do we promote the growth and development of community gardens, right? You may not have enough space to grow something on your own. You may not have that backyard space or front yard space, but how about that space within the community where people can come together and plant different things and use that as a way of teaching? How about the curriculum, you know, combining Nigerian agriculture with Nigerian history, home economics, food and nutrition, not just after school activities where we're learning how to make fried rice and things that have no historical or direct contribution to helping us feel empowered. How about, you know, having us talk to schools and talking across a whole variety of spaces about our foods and what is nutritious. And I think we need to also reframe how local food is nutritious, but also can be incredibly delicious. And that versatility of food and taking an ingredient and exploring various uses, even building new use cases is important. So lots to do, different angles to approach it from, but I think that we're on the right path.
Thank you, Ozoz. I love the creativity and the breadth of your perception and the need for many, many actors to take on different pieces. One person can't do it all. And the need for immediate collaboration. I love the analogy to Nkobi and the French cuisine. And I think, the fusions that I see on your page, Kitchen Butterfly, I just love those fusions because it eases people into understanding the diversity, but also the beauty, richness, and the nutrition of our food. So thank you so much for all you do. Chef Pierre, I'm coming to you because building on the question I posed to Ozoz, when I look at the global rankings of food, Africa is grouped as one continent, put on the same page as Japanese food, with Japanese food ranked #1 and African food not even in the rankings. And that makes me upset because, as you can imagine, we've said the future of food is Africa. Africa defines the future of food. How can we change that drastically? Because we have the best food in the world. The rest of the world has to know that. How can we accelerate the work you've been doing through, Yolele, but also other avenues? And who are the actors we need to get in the room to start shaping this narrative?
Well, that's a very, very interesting question. Actually, I think it begins in this room. Actually, all these actors are showing us that it takes a village. It's not going to be the work of one chef. It's you look at Japanese food, it wasn't known until it got known, but it took a political will to begin with. And then you saw this movement of young Japanese going to France to immerse themselves into cooking schools, but then never forgot their tradition, and they returned with that technicity, but revisited their tradition. And that's where they find inspiration. Personally, when I first moved to New York in the late 80s, really, and working in various restaurants in New York City, the so-called food capital of the world, I like to say that Africa was absent. And I saw this as an opportunity for me. I was like, I grew up in Senegal. This is an amazing food culture. Not to mention Nigeria. I'm blown away by Nigerian cuisine. I mean, this is just unacceptable to me that in this place that calls itself food capital, Africa is absent in this way, and again, I'm even using the term Africa when it should be really, there's so many different, there's the diversity, there's not one African cuisine, and I even like to do that in my cuisines. When you come to my restaurant, you don't see a specific country. My cuisine is inspired by Senegalese, by Nigerian, by Ivorian, Cote d'Ivoire, West Africa in general. But I find inspiration in that because that transcends the borders, and so that goes beyond colonialism, because this is where I find my inspiration, beyond colonialism. This colonialism that imposed upon us those borders are not real. The regions are real. The crops that you see in specific areas are real, but they transcend the borders, and food is supposed to do that. It's supposed to break the barriers. So as a chef, I found that inspiration in that tradition, and I visited that tradition, and that's like a deep well of inspiration. It never ends. That was really the biggest, for me, the biggest key to my journey, is to go through the tradition and look for the inspiration and bring it to the world. And the world is ready for it, and it's just a matter of time before the world really recognize the potential of Africa. People are more conscious now, and like you mentioned earlier, with the digital era we're living in, communication goes, and people are looking for food that is not only nutritious, which is what Africa is full of, food that is good for the planet, which is also another thing that Africa can contribute. And people are also looking for the next food frontier. They have explored all of those frontiers they have been talking about. I've seen how it evolved. When we first arrived, it was really in New York City, it was French cuisine and Chinese cuisine, and then gradually the Indian came, and then the Thai food came. I mean, imagine Japanese, even in the late 90s, people weren't eating sushi. People didn't even, they were repulsed by the idea of eating raw fish. And now you can buy sushi around the corner. So, but it takes political will. It takes different actors to do it. It's not only the chef. It takes the writers. It takes us. It takes Dr. Ndiame. It takes Lesego. It takes Ndidi to really focus on bringing this cuisine to the forefront, and these cuisines, I should say, to the forefront. And there's so much that we will bring to the forefront that, at that moment, Africa is going to impose itself to the world. Like you said, we have a great tradition, we have great flavors, we have great ingredients, we have what it takes, and we have also the land to produce that food. So this is really, and the consumers are ready. Thanks to the media, the craze for food, the consumers are looking for the next food frontier, and Africa is bringing that exoticism that they are looking to include in their diet. In addition, it's good for you, and it's going to save the planet. So all those reasons. Hopeful for Africa and the cuisine. Does it make sense?
Does. I think Ndidi is frozen for now.
She's frozen. Okay. I was like, okay, I don't hear any echoes.
Yeah. But so maybe just because our first is not just to build on what you're saying, Pierre. Firstly, I like the notion of innovation, because ultimately the vitality comes with continuous innovation, which is only going to the roots, but also going out. I think this cross-fertilization of perspective, and I think this is exactly what Ozoz was talking about. And it's really, during the Food System Summit, one thing that I found very impressive is from all the conversation that took place across the board, emerged a unique African position on food system, which then create the political will to create the ecosystem and the environment that enable the SMEs and others to drive it. So I think I totally concur with you.
Yes, and also to talk about innovation, this is also one part of it. I mean, we have to be creative, like Oz mentioned. And one thing for me was just one example, and I'd like to talk about fonio as an example. We started with fonio first as a grain, and then gradually we added pilafs, fonio pilafs, all inspired by the traditional of African cuisine. But then we entered the snack category, and we launched fonio chips. We have like 4 different flavors of fonio chips, some using dawa dawa, some using just sea salt. But the chips is something the consumer can relate to easier, and they go to the supermarkets and the chips are flying off the shelves and grow and gradually because that's something that's less intimidating, and that gradually gets them into using these ingredients. So that's just a method, and next you will see fonio pastas and fonio, other things that other culture can relate to. And we're still winning at the end. It's still our products that are getting into the market. And those people will be ready now to try the jollof fonio or the other ingredients that are specifically more African, because they are prepared for that. So it's really a matter of a strategy, really. But like you said, it also we need political will, and we have to do it in a way that's really intentional. Japanese were intentional, Thai were intentional. Thai were very intentional in introducing their cuisine to the world. Very intentional. They played a role in the tourism, and today Thai food is globally known.
You're absolutely right about.
Welcome back, Ndidi. We continue the conversation.
Welcome back, Ndidi. Yes.
Thank you so much. I know we have leaders in the group. Thank you. We actually have to start rounding up. So please, as you speak, just end with your charge. I'm going to go around with everyone. As you make your comments, please end with your charge for us. This future of food is Africa. Africa is the future of food. So please give us a charge. Thank you. Also, let's continue.
Okay, I was going to touch on the role of gastro diplomacy and culinary diplomacy, which is where public sector meets private sector meets tourism. Thailand, Japan, Italy, Malaysia, Australia have done that in a variety of ways. TV programs, books, summits, a whole variety of things. And for me, my charge is we need to figure out pathways to really working with our different governments to kind of create these long-term strategies and visions that are sequenced, but that address that have very clear goals of putting our food, our products on store shelves across the world. And in doing so, develop local industries, whether they're around content creation, so media, from video to audio to written. And, I'd just like to see more support for people who are developing content and actually using that as a channel to showcase the glory of food across Africa. And thank you once again for having me. And it's been a pleasure to be on this panel with all of you. I've really enjoyed listening to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ozoz. Fantastic. A real call to action. We need to document, we need to showcase, we need to amplify, and we need to support those who have put themselves out there as narrative changers. Let's come to you, Lesego.
Thanks, Ndidi. And I'm so encouraged just hearing, all of the views from, our panelists. And, I was in the US this past summer and I was so disappointed. The first thing that I do going to Trader Joe's or Whole Foods, I go to the shelves to look for African foods. And the disappointment in me, it's almost like I expect to see better in terms of like foods, the African foods that are on the shelves. However, I do think it takes a lot of intentionality from all of us, from government, one, making sure that, entrepreneurs are export ready, two, and, entrepreneurs can package their food well, labeling, barcoding, literally like the details. Our entrepreneurs need to be supported in that. And also custom clearing as well, making sure that the process is seamless on the border, at the borders, for the client to, or the entrepreneur to package their product and ship it across to the US or ship it across to Europe. And also encouraging our entrepreneurs to have more of like the B2B meetings, with potential agents or distributors. So there's so much that it needs to take place, but it's going to take all of us. And I'm not even mentioning the costs of obtaining industry certification. So I think even the foundations need to consider ways they could help entrepreneurs access, funding for being food compliant and making sure that their factories are also compliant for the export market. So I'm excited, and I hope that in the next 5 years, when I walk into those US grocery shops or European grocery shops, the narrative is going to change.
Thank you so much, Lesego. Chef Pierre, 1 minute, and Fadel, 1 minute.
Well, in 1 minute, I think I'm just going to take the example of Yolele. What was important for us is to create a brand, create a brand that would stand on the shelves in front of any other brands and give it a chance to be picked by the consumer. So it's important that start with the packaging. The packaging has to be on top, and your message has to be clear. Our brand is proudly African, obviously, and we also need to help entrepreneurs realize the need to have that brand. And obviously, before getting to the shelves, there are steps to getting to the shelves, which are the certifications, which are the way it's processing. The processing has to have a certain standard. So we need to have assistance on that. When I studied Yolele, it was really realizing that it's not just taking a product on the shelf. We have to recreate a whole chain of value, because this is not happening yet in Africa at that scale. And this is the only way. You have to make sure there is, the product is bought at fair trade from the farmers benefit from it, the processing is done in Africa in a way to add value, to bring employment, much needed, there's like we said, there's a big youth population without jobs, opportunities. And the answer is there. We have agriculture and processing agriculture to add value. And not only our food security, we're guaranteeing our food security by doing that, but we're becoming exporters. Like Lesego said, we are net importers. We're becoming exporters now. It's just a revolutionary approach. And I think Untitled can be a model of development. There are so many other products that can follow that same path that we have done. The world is ready for that. The consumers are ready for that. And this is our way out of this quagmire we are in. This is our way to development. This is just really forcing that. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And for Dr. Fadel, 30 seconds. Yeah. What's your charge?
30 seconds. Firstly, I enjoy so much this discussion. I think in itself, it speaks to the hope that we see, appreciating the diversity, enhancing our heritage, and conquering the world. Because the African Continental Free Trade Area is going to be the biggest market in the world. This is where entrepreneurship, creativity, finance, and political will reinvent the future of food. Thank you, Ndidi, for an amazing job you're doing by providing the ecosystem of SMEs that lead to this conversation. I look forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. This has been fantastic. I'm leaving encouraged and inspired by the good work you're doing. And yes, there are many entrepreneurs ready to follow in your footsteps, Lesego and Chef Pierre. And Ozoz, many of us are supporting and cheering you on. And Dr. Fadel, we need to work with you and other policymakers, game changers, and funders. Collaboratively, we can create the future that we all desire, the future we believe we can achieve in our lifetime. And thank you again to the Segal Family Foundation and BMW Foundation. Please follow all of these rock stars on social media. This conversation continues on Changing Narratives Africa. God bless you all and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.